I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
So you're running out of closet space. The good news? You don't need to stop shopping. You just need to start selling with The RealReal. The RealReal is the world's largest and most trusted resource for authenticated luxury resale. Whether it's that mini bag that can't even fit your phone, or those boots you never fully broke in, The RealReal handles everything from photography and copywriting to shipping and pricing. So you can just sit back, get paid, and make room for things that actually feel like you. And with 10,000 plus new arrivals every single day from top designers like Prada, Celine, Louis Vuitton, and Loewe, all for up to 90% off retail, you're bound to find something perfectly on brand to fill that extra closet space with. Plus, right now, you can get an extra $100 to shop when you sell for the first time. Make room for what feels like you. Go to therealreal.com to start selling and get your extra $100 to keep shopping at therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com. Terms apply.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
What?
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Hello, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the spiciest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they had transpired today? I'm your co-host, Sarah Sahagian.
And I'm your other co-host, Sadaf Hassan. Today we are diving into one of the most iconic love stories of all time, largely because it ended in immense tragedy. I am talking John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. They weren't just a couple, they were American royalty. He was the son of a president and arguably the most famous man in America at the time. She was a Calvin Klein publicist with beautiful blonde hair, perfect tailoring, and, dare I say, a delicious sense of humor. Together, they were chased, they were photographed, they were obsessed over. It was a love story unfolding in real time. And then, in 1999, it ended in one of the most shocking tragedies of the decade when the two met their untimely deaths in a plane crash. Today, we're talking about the love, the rumors, the fashion, the cheating allegations, all of it. But first, Sarah, I want to know, how do you remember these two? And was this a love story that you looked up to? Because I know a lot of people did and still do, actually.
No, and for like a really superficial reason. At the time, I feel like our culture was divided in this really weird way where it was you were team blonde or team brunette. I just felt like, this was a dream for blondes, right? Like the Grace Kelly dream that that was just not the love story for me, which is such a weird superficial thing, but I was a little girl.
I know.
And her dress was also very disappointing to me because when you're a little kid, you don't like minimalism. So her wedding dress, when I saw that, I was like, I'm out. They're saying she's an American Princess Diana. Nope. So what about
agreed.
You?
Oh my gosh, completely agreed. Well, I mean, speaking of the blonde versus brunette, we've talked about it in previous episodes, particularly when we talked about Jennifer Aniston and Angelina Jolie. You're so right. It was such a thing. It's wild. It's not anymore. So there's that. And I also didn't love the dress. I have more respect for it now.
Yeah, me too.
At the time, I'm with you though. As a child, I was like, that is not a big princess dress. Okay,
no.
I need a gown. I need poof.
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't. So I was alive and I was old enough to take this in, but I don't think I really understood a lot of what was going on until like maybe some years later. And I thought, oh, it's really cool in terms of the Kennedy lineage and the Kennedy history, because so much of that is endlessly fascinating. And I think many of us have had a Kennedy phase where like I was just obsessed and I wanted to read everything and know everything. Of course, this was kind of the pinnacle at the time, but I was a little perplexed. Like, what was it about Carolyn specifically? And what was it about these two together that made everybody lose their minds? But the reality is, sometimes it is as simple as they were just two beautiful people, right? Yeah. Okay, well, let's dig in because we're going to answer that question together. So, I want to start with John. This man was famous before he could even understand what fame was. So, do the math. He was the son of John F. Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy, now or later Jackie Kennedy Onassis. And from the moment he saluted his dad's coffin at just 3 years old, he became this living symbol of American grief and hope. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look up photos now of little baby John by his dad's coffin. It's sad to see, but it's also quite an image. People watched him grow up in real time, so they projected all kinds of meaning onto him. And as he grew up, the paparazzi and America were watching, which I would never want in my life. I can't even imagine. He grew into a hell of a heartthrob, too. So he even got named Sexiest Man Alive by People magazine, which doesn't seem wild, but for a politician, it's rare. It's very rare.
Or a politician's son, right? Like he wasn't even a politician.
Thank you, Sarah. Politician's
just
son.
just like the scion of a president, right?
Yeah, exactly. He was constantly desired. Clearly, he was a sex object more than anything, I feel like, which is also fascinating for that family. But career-wise, things were a lot less perfect. And I feel like we don't talk about this enough when it comes to JFK Jr. So he went to law school, struggled quite a bit. He failed the bar twice. And, we don't judge that here. We are Kim Kardashian faithfuls here. We always root for our law school folk to get through it, to move forward. He did eventually pass, but oddly, he then chose to pivot and go into media. I find this to be such a mind-boggling choice still, and we're going to talk about it. But just to catch you guys up, he decided to start his own magazine. Now, he called it George, named after Washington, because I guess why not?
I mean, I would assume it was named after George Washington and not like, George Bernard Shaw or I guess George Clooney in the early days of ER. Like, I don't know.
I remember at the time I was so befuddled. I was just like, is his middle name George? I mean, I was young. I didn't get it. I did not get it. But the thesis of the magazine was actually ahead of its time, I think, because it merged politics with celebrity culture and fashion, which is pretty poignant. And I think actually if maybe that publication came out now, it would get a little bit more respect. I don't know that it would do well because, again, print is not doing well. But you might know the infamous first cover, maybe. It featured Cindy Crawford dressed as George Washington. Pretty hot photo. We will link it in the show notes. But definitely not something that I think the average person is picking up at the Shoppers Drug Mart aisle, right? So long story short, because honestly, we could do a whole episode just on the trajectory of George, but the magazine only lasted from 1995 to 2001. Although at first it was a massive hit, it actually had the highest circulation of any political magazine in America, largely, obviously, thanks to JFK's involvement. Like, people knew he was involved, so they would just buy it for that reason. But it eventually tanked, I think partly because that can only last so long. John was also worried it was because no one was taking him seriously, which I actually do believe was a factor. His friend, Matt Berman, was the creative director, and these two were constantly at odds while they were working on the magazine. And there's so much to read about that. It's actually quite juicy, but also very sad because I think it really tore them apart. The fact was, from what I've assessed, John didn't seem to take the job seriously either. In an effort to help sales, they tended to use controversy as bait. So, for instance, one time in an editorial in the magazine, John decided to criticize his own cousins, Michael and Joe Kennedy, because they were going through their own relationship scandals at the time, which I think was just such a poor choice. He kind of threw his family under the bus to sell magazines, essentially. The publisher's CEO said he believed the issue was that John never accepted profiles and interviews for the mag with people its demo actually cared about. Like, he's believed to have turned down an interview with Princess Diana because he just felt like it didn't suit the magazine, which is perplexing to me.
That's very weird.
Yeah, and the CEO also said he felt like John just never wanted to take any risks, which is surprising to me because I think just choosing to start a magazine at that time was a risk, and especially one that's about politics and pop culture. An odd choice, right? I think he was a little lost in the sauce when it came to figuring out what he wanted to do with his career. His family, of course, wanted him to go into politics, and it was believed that he eventually would do that once he got it together. But Sarah, I want to know what you think. What do you think was going through his mind? Because to me, George felt like such an odd and kind of ill-fitting path.
Okay, so one thing I've never understood about George, isn't that just sort of what Vanity Fair was? Because it would sometimes talk about politics, but also talk about pop culture and fashion. Vanity Fair is just like, let's explore the zeitgeist, right? So I don't understand why he felt that there was a need for George, A. So I'm not really sure what the vision was, other than if it was just like, we're going to have Maxim style covers of Cindy Crawford and then politics and pop culture inside.
Well, Sarah, may I note, I wouldn't say Maxim style. She's quite covered, and dare I say too covered, because she's really in the full Washington regalia.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, I just never really understood what George was supposed to be. And I actually thought about this a lot as an adult. Like, was there a need for this? Because I love politics, right? I am the publisher of a news website, right? So I love politics and I love reading about them, but I just sort of thought, I don't actually think this was a hole in the magazine industry at the time. I mean, obviously now print is very sadly not doing well. But I don't think there was ever a need for this, even as somebody who loves both pop culture and politics. I'm like, I should be the target demo. And even I don't think I would pay money for George, right?
You're right. I mean, you and I are the target demo. I second everything you said. I love politics. I love examining it at the intersection of culture. What does that tell us? And you're spot on, because Vanity Fair was the pinnacle of that, right? And I love Vanity Fair. And I was very confused again. And I was young, but I was really addicted to magazines and I did not comprehend what the hell George was about. I think also we keep making jokes about it, but I don't think the name helped. And I think JFK himself didn't really help in a weird way. Like, I think people would have bought the magazines regardless of what he wanted to make it about, but that can only last so long. Like, you need to have a real thesis behind it. And I think the other thing is, I'm not sure how dedicated he was to it, really. He didn't have a journalism background. I think he just felt like making a magazine and he had the family money.
I think he just thought it sounded glamorous, right? I mean,
exactly.
And didn't realize it was work, right? And creating a magazine every month is one of the hardest jobs you can do if you're actually doing it.
It's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work. I mean, people like Tina Brown, people who love to work, are the people who thrive in that type of environment, right? And if that's not you, if you are not a workaholic who's obsessed with print journalism, it's not going to work. I'm sure JFK Jr. was a nice guy. Do I believe he could actually even read a magazine cover to cover without getting bored and going to play squash? No, I don't think he was a reader, so I don't know if he could produce a monthly magazine for other people to read. I don't know.
Oh, Sarah, I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, you're so right. Actually, I didn't even think about it that way. Yeah, I don't know that he was even a guy who generally read magazines prior to this. So it's clear he really counted on his team and he really counted on Berman, and he put a lot of pressure on that man. And I don't think, listen, some people will hate me for saying this if you're deep in the Kennedy world and you know all this stuff, but some people will take Matt's side, some people will take John's side. I think it's weird that JFK was not willing to put in quite as much effort as he expected his friend to, because this is a big undertaking. And if you're putting your name on this, your family's name on this, and you want it to become this huge juggernaut, I'd expect a little more out of you. And I just feel like he was not interested. He just didn't care after it was really launched. And I do think, let me rephrase, actually, I do think he cared. I just think he didn't realize, as you said, how much work it would take and more effort.
Exactly. Which, I mean, he has this kind of like childlike naivete, at least the way he's portrayed on Love Story. And just from what I've gathered from doing cursory research about him, I know you've done way more research on him. It's like, did you think that they just happened, like magazines just appeared like Christmas presents on Christmas morning that actually your mother puts there, but you think Santa Claus put there. Does he think there's like magazine Santa Claus and that was his friend? Right. So I don't know. It's very weird. But I guess if you have that level of privilege where you're the son of a former president that everyone fell in love with because of this awful tragedy. And I know that that tragedy is a disadvantage, but it also in some ways becomes a form of privilege because everyone's rooting for you. And then you're as good looking as he was, which was almost, I don't even know if it's physically possible for people to be that good looking. I don't even know how that happens. He was so handsome because, I mean, sometimes you even look at pictures with him and Carolyn is a gorgeous woman, but next to him, she looks actually pretty ordinary because he was so superhuman attractive. And I guess if you have that level of privilege, maybe you've never had to work for a damn thing. And it doesn't occur to you that running George is going to take effort.
I completely agree. And I will say the other bit too was that I feel he was leaning more towards the pop culture side of it and the balance was lost because listen, again, I'm a big magazine hound and I can't tell you more than maybe one or two, really even then I struggle to name like a key editorial or column that came from that magazine that we could talk about now. Whereas I could mention quite a few from Vanity Fair, right? But that's of course a very different his publication history. But even if you look up a random cover now of George, it's like a lot of celebrity all over that cover. And I kind of am like, well, where was the intersection? Your following is heavy on the political side. You should have taken advantage of that. And I don't know that he had that. And there was enough work put into getting the writing together as opposed to the fashion and the shoots and the visual editorials. Alas. There has been rumors, I mean, now that they're all back in the zeitgeist, that maybe there should be a resuscitation of George, but
no.
I don't know about that. Leave it to Vanity Fair, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, now let's talk Carolyn Bessette. So she comes from a very different world, like very different. It is very much Romeo and Juliet in a sense of their different dynamics. And I think that's part of why they were so beloved because it's so romantic. But she grew up in suburban New York and Connecticut. No political dynasty, no global spotlight, not a bunch of family money. She built her career in fashion. Now, by the early 1990s, she's working as a publicist at Calvin Klein, which is at the time truly the epicenter of cool. Like Calvin was everything. And she wasn't just any publicist. She was handling major clients. She was navigating celebrity relationships, moving in very high fashion, high status circles, basically. She was known for being super composed, very private, very aloof. I think like the most aloof celebrity we've ever had. And visually, she was iconic before she was even famous, right? So she had this incredible blonde hair that was always very sleek, very straight, a very specific color. She used very minimal makeup and tailoring was everything for her. She loved a neutral palette. Not only did her style become an American blueprint, but she was actually responsible for hand-picking a young Kate Moss as the girl to be featured alongside Marky Mark in those early Calvin ads, which is kind of wild because those ads were really monumental. And I think they shifted fashion in a way and also redefined what is considered cool in that industry. She and Kate even lived together for a time, which I don't think a lot of people realize.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Sarah, I want to know, do you feel like CBK was a fashion icon or is she a little overrated?
I've talked about this with a lot of friends and we haven't talked about it yet because we're saving it for the show, but was she well-dressed or was she just tall?
Right? Yeah, and skinny.
Tall and skinny, right? Because if you were tall and skinny, tailoring, sure, is everything, but also it's not hard to tailor a body like that, right? So that's the thing. You will look good even in off-the-rack clothes. And yes, she had access to Calvin Klein. She had access to designer clothes. And I do think I like her choice to do minimalism.
Yeah.
But also that's a choice a lot of us can't make, right? A lot of us, I'm too busty to even wear most blouses. So like
Same. I can't
show
do a button
up in a
like
men's
that.
Blouse where there's no room for boobs. Like I'm not showing up in that.
Forget about it.
And I think that some of this is my own jealousy because I feel like she created a trend. That's not entirely her fault where we were coming of age where I personally felt, and I know a lot of women felt like this, like there wasn't a place for me with fashion, right? Because I couldn't do that tailoring. I wasn't tall. I didn't look like Gwyneth Paltrow. I wasn't tall and I didn't have a small bust. And I know a lot of women feel that way too, right? And of course, like there was no size inclusion, like plus sizes didn't exist in the designer world at all at that time. So it was just awful on a number of levels. And obviously she's not single-handedly responsible for that, but she did, in my mind, become a symbol for that time. So I have a lot of really complicated feelings about her look that are not her fault. And I feel bad because in my mind, I don't know if I scapegoat her, but I definitely make her an emblem of this time in fashion that for me caused me a lot of body image issues. I don't know. What about you? Do you like her style?
I'm actually so happy you shared that because you just sort of crystallized how I felt. And I also felt very guilty for feeling that way. Even today, I feel guilty because, as again, they've come back into the headlines thanks to Love Story, the show. I felt it all over again. I don't know if you have too.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel a bit resentful. And you're right. I mean, it wasn't all her. It was, and she didn't do that. She didn't ask for that, right? But you're right. She became the face of it. And I think what's interesting is, again, now she's continuing to be that conversation. It's kind of incredible. Things really are so cyclical, but we again are having conversations about how she is the fashion icon. And I feel that she is only a fashion icon for a certain group of women that is very rarefied in reality. And I will say her style was very timeless. I mean, you could wear any one of those outfits today and it would work. However, I think to another degree, it was a very simple style. Like she essentially had a uniform in a way, right? It was very, yes, again, the tailoring was everything. And I think that's always should be the key, but she stuck to a pretty neutral color palette. Once in a while, she'd have a really big pop of color. She'd have really giant totes that she'd carry around, a nice leather tote. She'd sometimes have her hair back in a bun or a ponytail, but for the most part, she stuck to a pretty strict wardrobe regimen. I don't find it to be personally the most impactful in my taste. Being so diplomatic, but I agree. It just wasn't something that made sense for what my body looks like. And as a brown woman, I certainly did not feel like it spoke to me, right? Like this, I felt was for white women, and I continue to feel that today.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. The other weird thing, and I'm just going to say this, and I don't mean it as an insult, she kind of dressed like Steve Jobs. Like it's just, they kind of are very similar, right? Where it's like jeans and a black turtleneck, like basics. That was her vibe. And that was his vibe too. So it's not that creative in my mind, right? Where it's like, yeah, I think she looks great. Do I think it's creative? Do I think it's interesting? Do I think it's interesting the way, say, like designs put together by like Vivienne Westwood are interesting? No, right? Like, I don't think, here's the thing. I'm a big fashion is art person. But when I look at her, I think she looks great. I don't see art. I see she's put together. I see clean cut, but I don't see art and creativity. And that might just be my prejudice because art can be simple, but that's why she's just not my style icon. And then, as you said, right, she became such just a symbol of the white supremacy and the skinny shame and the body shaming that was part of fashion at the time and still is, right? There still is a lot of body shaming. You still see a disproportionate number of white models and white people in fashion blogs and things like that. And again, not her fault that she became the symbol, right? She's not single-handedly making the fashion industry this dysfunctional. But yeah, it's just hard to disentangle when you have somebody who you actually don't know that much about. And all you know is how she looks and that she was constantly being put in fashion magazines as inspo. It's hard not to develop these feelings.
Yeah, completely. And again, we're saying this was inadvertent. She didn't make that happen, right? And unfortunately, by the way, guys, there's not a ton of, first of all, audio that we have from Carolyn or really much profiling. There's really not a lot where she gets to speak in her own words, unfortunately. Very intentional on her part. So it's hard to even say how she felt about that. I'm very curious. I don't think she loved this. So I will say that. We know she didn't love being in the public eye. We're going to get into it in a sec. But the last statement on this I will say is fashion and style are two different things. And that's all I'm going to say. Okay, now let's get into it because I think the big question is for some of you who are maybe unaware of the details of all of this is how the hell did these two beautiful people meet? Obviously through fashion. Come on. So JFK reportedly first noticed Carolyn while she was working at Calvin Klein. Now there's a lot of different opinions on how this happened. Calvin, of course, insists he introduced them. And I do think by and large that is essentially what happened. There were a lot of people in the room. It does seem like it was probably at a party, and it wasn't maybe necessarily about hooking them up, but about just getting them to say hi or hello. I think Calvin will tell you he mechanized all of that and meant for them to fall in love. And sure, why not? Calvin himself, by the way, is a fascinating story. And
Yes.
maybe we'll get into him too one day. But anyway, she was dating someone else at the time. So that's the big thing here. So even though they met, he was super into her, but she was not interested in getting swept up in his orbit at all. She was kind of like unimpressed, which I think is really cool. Like, this woman was cool. I like her approach to JFK at the time. So she's not interested. He's very interested. He pursues her persistently, calls her, tries to ask her out again and again. Eventually, around 1994, they did start dating. She did give in. Now, almost immediately, everything changed for her, because dating him does not mean you just have a boyfriend, right? It means you become one of the most watched women in America overnight. I can't even imagine. The paparazzi descended every walk, every coffee run, every cigarette break. It was all a photo op. And while he was used to that level of attention, because reminder, he grew up in it, right? He didn't really know any different. He was a baby at his father's funeral, essentially, with people clustering around trying to get a shot. But she didn't have any of that. This was all new to her. And here's the thing, she didn't want any of it. And that's the tension, I think, at the heart of their relationship from the very start. He understood fame was a given, but for her, it was more of an invasion. And I think that's the really interesting irony between them, because part of why he loved her was that she didn't court his fame. She didn't really care about his name, right? And what it could do for her, unlike so many other women. And for her, it was a massive personal struggle. In my opinion, if these two had lived, I don't know that they would have made it, honestly, because I think this was an increasing struggle for her. And Sarah, you mentioned Princess Diana earlier, and I'm not saying she is Princess Di, but I think the overall situation reminds me of that, because as we know, and we've talked about Princess Diana, of course, on previous episodes, but as she started to engage in other relationships, but even just overall through her time with the royal family, she was hounded by paparazzi to the point where she lost her life, right? And these two were constantly afraid of that. Like, they also would struggle just to pull their car out of the parking lot because they were surrounded. That's scary.
Yeah, it is scary.
Yeah. So, Sarah, I wonder, because this is something I've thought about a lot, oddly, and especially as I'm watching the show. But do you feel like you would have been able to handle that level of fame for love? Because I think that's the big selling point here, right? Allegedly, that she was so in love with him that it didn't matter what price she had to pay.
Yeah. And okay, so I find these things somewhat challenging, because for love for JFK, I mean, I can't imagine myself being in love with him. I can imagine myself thinking he's hot and just wanting him to
with him.
and wanting him to be in my home like a statue, just like, don't say anything, don't move, you're so handsome.
Correct.
But when I think of somebody like, would I do this for like Stanley Tucci?
Oh,
I think I'd try. I think
Actually,
I'd try
I
for
would.
a few
We
years.
would.
Yeah, I would. I think I would. But not that Stanley Tucci brings this level of attention. But I don't know. It's really hard to say, right? If you've never been in this position, I don't know. And I go back and forth on it, because sometimes I think like, just put up with it, Carolyn. It'll get better in a few years. But I don't know. And would it have gotten better? Because this man would never, it seems like, recede from the headlines. And part of it is funny in Love Story. They're kind of implying that while he has a love-hate relationship with the press, like he doesn't entirely hate it. And because he kind of courts it a little bit, they take it too far. Like, they're not victim blaming by any means, but they're sort of suggesting that, he understands how to use it as a tool. And so sometimes he does. And because he sometimes uses it as a tool, the prices, they're always going to be hounding him, right? It's not like Caroline, his sister, who never uses it as a tool, and therefore they do invade her privacy sometimes, but more or less leave her alone. Also, he was living in Manhattan. Like, find yourself an estate in Hudson, just be a little bit harder for them to access, right? But he didn't want to live the way Carolyn lived, right? So it is interesting, because I do think to a certain extent it was a little bit of a choice, and he never completely chose his wife over and above the option to use the press to promote his work and to promote himself when he wanted to.
Ooh, isn't that the thing? I so agree. I think that is partly why I feel like they would not have lasted. I think it would have become too impossible to ignore. And I think for me, if I put myself in her shoes, which also, yeah, it's so hard to do, but I imagine that at some point I would become resentful because even though he's saying for so much, I assume, and the show tells us that, and I'm sure this was happening, but he would comfort her and be like, it's not going to be like this forever. And I promise it's not what I want either. And we're going to try to get through this. That at the same time, and as her mother did actually warn her in real life, that it's only going to get worse because presumably he would eventually go into politics. I do think he would have, and that would mean so much more, so much more. But that also would mean that she's playing a role in that life. And I don't know how much she thought this through. And I don't know if either of them were really honest with each other about how they felt if this carried on. Like, I wish that he had been more honest about what his future was going to be and what he wanted. But again, though, it seems like they were so infatuated that she probably would have just signed up regardless. Gosh, I don't know.
And I struggle, and maybe through your research you found this, I struggle to understand what the foundation of their love was. Like, obviously they're two attractive people, but that can get you through a few months, right? How did they get down the aisle? What was the source of their connection? Because he dated lots of beautiful women, didn't marry them. And she dated handsome guys before him.
She
was
dated
not the first
models,
hottie.
guys.
I know.
She had no problem.
I know. These are two people who had lots of dating options.
Yeah.
So what drew them to each other? Did you find any answers in your research? Like, did they have something in common?
It's a good question. I always have assumed from the research, and this is what I can understand, is that it was their sense of humor. And I think they could talk and talk and talk, which is great. But I do wonder if part of it, again, and I'm making an assumption because it's hard to know for real, right? Unless we really got to spend some time with them. But I have to assume that there was a charm. They were both very charming people. And I feel like they were charmed by each other's lives and outlooks because they were so different. And wouldn't that wear off at some point?
Yeah. Fairly quickly, I would assume.
Yeah.
I don't think it would last long enough to get married.
I mean, listen, maybe you and I have not experienced this
I don't
incredible
know.
magical love. But listen, I get it. They were both hot as hell. They're charming. They're funny. They can talk. That's enough for me, God knows. But I think, yeah, it's tough when you think about the price there was to pay. Like, if I go back to the Diana example, she, of course, rejected the royal family as much as she was able and tried to live her own life. But I think once you reached this point, it would be impossible. Because one thing I do think, even if these two had split, I think Carolyn would still be hounded for quite some time and criticized. And because here's the other part of it, as this was happening, she's also getting vilified by the media, right? Like, they're calling her terrible names. There's one of the biggest rumors was that she was a coke addict, which is wild. There's nothing that suggests she ever even dabbled in it. Maybe she did, by the way. We don't know, but there's no actual proof or evidence to suggest that. And this is the time when we had like the Sun going all over the Daily Mail. All those kinds of publications were having a field day, so they would make up whatever. And I think part of the thing too is people didn't know enough about her history, so they could make up whatever they wanted. Yeah, scary. Okay, we're going to take a quick little break, digest all of that, and we'll be right back.
So you're running out of closet space. The good news? You don't need to stop shopping. You just need to start selling with The RealReal. The RealReal is the world's largest and most trusted resource for authenticated luxury resale. Whether it's that mini bag that can't even fit your phone, or those boots you never fully broke in, The RealReal handles everything from photography and copywriting to shipping and pricing. So you can just sit back, get paid, and make room for things that actually feel like you. And with 10,000 plus new arrivals every single day from top designers like Prada, Celine, Louis Vuitton, and Loewe, all for up to 90% off retail, you're bound to find something perfectly on brand to fill that extra closet space with. Plus, right now, you can get an extra $100 to shop when you sell for the first time. Make room for what feels like you. Go to therealreal.com to start selling and get your extra $100 to keep shopping at therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com. Terms apply.
And we're back. Now, in 1996, these two managed to do something almost impossible for a couple of their stature. They get married in secret. Impressive. They had some leaks, but not big leaks. No paparazzi, no spectacle. They got married on Cumberland Island in Georgia in a small, intimate ceremony that feels almost like an escape from the world that's constantly watching them. That's what they wanted. Like, it was small. There was no air conditioning. It was a very hot day. There was no electricity. Like, they really went for isolated. Letitia Baldridge, Jackie Kennedy's secretary at the time, said it was a very complicated plan for the wedding. Evidently, according to her, it took 6 months to get together. All guests and staff had to sign confidentiality agreements, while invitations were sent out only days before the wedding. The island was remote, accessible only by ferry or private plane. Small private
Well, they're
plane, mind
Kennedys,
you.
so they have planes. It's fine.
Exactly. Only the rich folk could get there. Now, John and Carolyn, can you imagine? It's like, just based on the location, there's no poors invited to this wedding.
No.
Now, John and Carolyn also arrived separately at the local airport before they were being transported to the island, completely unseen by anyone. There was a rumor at the time, I love this, that a journalist found out the location and realized to get to the island, he'd have to cross a swampy area infested with alligators. He did do this, and he got stuck in the mud. He was so exhausted that he surrendered to the security guards and even asked to be arrested to just be put out of his misery.
Oh,
to
wow.
clarify, this is a big rumor, but it was reported by quite a few publications, so I think it's fair to say it probably did happen.
Was he assigned this for work?
That's the sense that I got, because otherwise, where's this dedication coming
I know.
from?
Then I feel bad for him because he's just trying to keep his job. I actually have a lot of sympathy for this man who almost died, almost got eaten by alligators.
I know, but you know what I've always felt? Like, it would have been such a damn good editorial if he wrote about that anyway.
Yeah.
Like, the process of finding out, then trying to get there, getting stuck, saying, please arrest me. That would be a piece that he'd probably still be known for. I wish he wrote it.
For sure. I mean, yes, absolutely. But I actually, if this did happen, I feel I have nothing but sympathy for this man.
I know, brutal. Some of the stuff some reporters have to go through. Listen, we suffer sometimes. Anyway, now, no matter how much work they put into this, of course, a few photos managed to leak. Specifically, of the moment they said I do. So the ring was out there. And then, of course, as Sarah alluded to earlier, Carolyn's dress, a sleek silk slip dress. It did indeed take 2 hours for her to get into the dress. There were complications, so she was 2 hours late to the ceremony. It was a whole thing, but it happened. I think in a weird way, it made the whole thing more romantic. God. Now, by this time, everyone assumed these two were perfection personified, right? Fairy tale love, fairy tale wedding, everything seemed so great. Obviously, not so much behind the scenes. Now, after the wedding, it seems like the reality of their life really set in. So Carolyn in particular is struggling more than ever at this point. The constant attention, lack of privacy, the feeling of being watched at all times. I couldn't stand it, honestly. There are reports of her trying to avoid photographers, of moments where she seems visibly distressed in public. You can even look at those photos now. It's easy to find. It just seemed like she had a growing sense that she was losing control over her own life. On top of that, she's constantly being compared to Jackie Kennedy, which is an impossible standard. And by this time, Jackie had passed, by the way. And the other thing, too, is she was no longer working for Calvin Klein at this point because she was becoming such a big name herself. So keep that in mind, right? She doesn't even get to follow her dream at this point, or at least in her mind, I think it was on pause. But I don't think she could have really carried on. There's a reason first ladies just go into nonprofit, essentially. There's not much to do if you want to build your own name. Okay, so then there's the Kennedy family itself. Less of a family, really, more like an institution, again, if we make that royal family comparison. So there's expectations, traditions, a certain way of being in the world, and Carolyn doesn't necessarily fit it neatly into that. She felt a lot like the Yoko. She's not political. She's not performative. She's not trying to play a role. That creates friction, or at least distance, between her and JFK's world. So there were rumors, too, that there was friction between her and Caroline, John's sister. Though Caroline was allegedly her maid of honor and her kids were ring bearers and flower girls. But there's also so many reports that said these two were totally fine with each other. Like they had a very warm connection. So that's really up for debate whether they actually were not friends of each other. Now, here's the part you might not want to hear. There were a lot of reports that John was cheating left and right. Par for the course, I think, if you're a celebrity at this level. There was specifically a lot said about him having a former flame and side piece he'd meet at a hotel on weeknights. In fact, she even stepped forward of how conveniently after their deaths to say that it was true and that they were meeting, but it's very easy to poke holes on that because he can't defend it. And again, no evidence. But there is quite a lot that suggests it was happening, I'm sorry to say. And there was a lot said about Carolyn continuing her fling with her Model X, Michael Bergen. Now, during this entire period, there are times where the pair were arguing in public, crying, clearly at odds. You can see that in the show. You got to go look up the photos. We'll link them in the show notes because I'm sorry to say they're something. And if you're as into pop culture as me and Sarah are, they were really like a fascinating moment in celebrity culture. But before their deaths, they were also in couples counseling. And I'm curious, Sarah and I are at a point right now where the finale has not hit us. And I think you guys will have seen it by now. So I'm curious if they're going to touch on that at all in the show. Now, I do want to add, it's true that Carolyn's family was not totally on board with JFK. Her mom did worry that Sean was sweeping Carolyn into his life without regard for her dreams. And it was rumored that her mom did give a toast touching on this at their wedding. And Carolyn's father did refuse to attend that wedding. Mind you, though, they were a little estranged. So I don't know that that's a sign of him so much rejecting JFK. Sarah, I want to know, how much truth do you think there is to all the rumor? Because if we take the love story as so much fact and we've made it into this certain fairy tale, well, then what do we say about the tabloid drama that's saying they were both cheating and they were both miserable?
I don't know. How can we decide what's fact, what's fiction? Because the tabloids at the time really would just make up anything, right? And I mean, I know tabloids still will, but cheating was a go-to. It was a very uncreative time. They would just accuse everybody of cheating in the 90s. And sometimes it was true and sometimes it wasn't. And listen, we'll never know for sure what happened with their marriage. And the thing about couples counseling is the interesting thing there. Now that's actually probably pretty routine. I would say most couples are encouraged to go to counseling, even for pretty minor things. In the 90s, that was the road to divorce, right? You only went if people thought you were about to get divorced, right? It was just the last stop. It was kind of the earn your divorce mentality. Try to work it out, prove to people that you can't. So I don't think they would have stayed married. What do you think?
I'm with you, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because at that time, if you heard that someone was in couples therapy, it was like the death knell, like you knew it was over. You're so right. Listen, allow me to share my personal opinion, which some of you will hate me for, but I do feel like there was cheating involved personally. Here's the thing. Obviously, when you are this famous, you're going to be hounded by endless rumors, and there's always cheating rumors. Especially when it's like a beautiful couple who are always in the magazines, there's going to be cheating rumors regardless. And there's also truth to, I believe, when there's smoke, there's fire. And I don't know if she was still seeing Michael Bergen because there's also not as much out there about that. I do have a feeling personally, again, I have no proof that JFK was cheating. I just have a feeling because there was so many reports, specifically of him having this particular fling at this particular hotel in New York. But again, like it's so easy to create these fanciful tales. And at that time, if you did have one, you could probably get paid a pretty penny by like, let's say People Magazine or whoever. So it would be in your best interest to make up a story if you happen to be, let's say, a maid at the Stanford Hotel. So I don't know. Maybe I'm also enjoying the salaciousness of it and going in that direction. I don't know. Maybe I'm also very cheated and I just believe men will cheat. I don't know. I want to believe that they were perfect and they were so dedicated to each other. But I do think the big truth of it all is they weren't actually that well suited for each other ultimately.
No, well, here's the thing. And I think this is something that they were trying to explain to him in Love Story. And I don't know if in real life anyone tried to explain this to him. But unfortunately, he was somebody who, if he wanted to go into politics, needed a Jackie, right? Like his father had found. But a Jackie was not going to like him because this man is very handsome, but not very intellectual. Doesn't give you great man vibes, just gives you like hot man vibes. Because he too would have been a model like Michael Bergen had he not been the son of a president.
Yeah.
So the women in his orbit who were kind of like, the women who were raised to be Jackie Kennedy, because listen, guys, there is a demographic of American upper class women and upper middle class women who are raised to be first lady. They are superbly educated. They are taught how to plan a charity function. They are taught how to dress in a way that is elegant and a little bit striking, but not over the top. There is a group of women that you can turn to, but they are looking for something else. They're looking for potential for greatness. That's another thing they're trained to do. And I've met women like this. And you know what? Would they probably have gone out for dinner with him because of his name? Would they have been a little bit tempted? Yes. Would the spell have worn off when they realized that he wasn't that bright and wasn't that hardworking and was never going to become president? Yes. Also, yes. So he kind of needed a woman who I don't think he could have actually gotten married to. This is just my theory. This is my take.
No, I completely agree with you. And I'm so glad you bring that perspective in because, a lot of us are not aware that there are those communities, and you are so right. They were deep in those worlds. Again, we're talking New York and Connecticut.
Yeah. He would have gone to school with women like this, right?
Yeah.
His sister's friends would have been raised like this, right? And clearly, either he just, for whatever reason, wasn't into those women because of some sort of, mommy issues where it's like, I can't marry my mother, reverse Oedipus complex. Or they weren't into him. I suspect it was a little bit of both, to be honest. I suspect it went both ways. But if you are raised that way and you're raised to look for, listen, I actually did a satirical speech about this when I was 16. There are a whole group of women who go to prep schools and were raised to find a stock with potential. Getting married is like the stock market, right? Who are really taught by their own mothers, who are brilliant women, could have done anything, but understood in patriarchy. If you are an attractive white woman, the best thing you can do if you want any modicum of power and success is to find a white man who's almost as smart as you are and very ambitious, and then be the wife of the CEO or be the wife of the first lady, right? That's the ending of Succession for a reason, right? Where Shiv is just well, this was my destiny all along, right? This is all I can achieve, right? And he really should have tried a little bit harder, worked a little bit harder, so a woman like that would have liked him. And I think in the long term, that's the only type of marriage that would have made him happy. Also, those women are raised to turn a blind eye if you cheat, right? Jackie did that. It bothers you. It's not that it doesn't bother them. It's not that they're made of stone, but they are raised to want to be matriarchs of a dynasty. And as long as you're not getting another woman pregnant, or as long as you're still going to the charity functions they plan and still successful, a lot of those women will stay with you because that's what they were trained to do.
Oh, I'm so glad you bring that up. That's so fascinating. And hey, he did date some of the women he went to school with when he was younger, so he got a taste of it. It did seem like he wanted to reject what he grew up in a little bit. And I can imagine that maybe he was born with a distaste for it all, and he wanted to go in the other direction. And because he did have the family name, family money, could really do anything he wanted. He could make any choice, right? And so I think he tried so hard to make those other choices, but I don't know that those choices really welcomed him in the same way. So, like you mentioned, Caroline was so good at being able to maintain a sense of privacy, but this guy is jogging through Central Park. He's getting his coffee and having dinner out in the open at popular restaurants and coffee shops, and he's not hiding. He's walking his dog through right past the cameras. So I don't know that I would say he welcomed it necessarily, but I think he was more okay with it to a degree than the rest of the family. He wanted to do something so different. Maybe it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, or maybe he was sabotaging himself in law school and he just couldn't get through. And I feel like he did the same thing in the women he was with. Now, this is a good moment to mention. So some of the women he previously dated, of course, some models, Sarah Jessica Parker, which I'm obsessed with. I wish we knew more about that entanglement. Brooke Shields for a time, Daryl Hannah, who we're going to talk about in a sec. he was dating a lot of celebrities. And I think if you wanted to have a quieter life, if you wanted to have privacy, you maybe wouldn't do that. So maybe in a way he was courting it. Like he clearly wanted a life in the spotlight, but that's also, I think, the reason you start up a magazine. Like you don't start a magazine if you want any semblance of privacy. Then you have Carolyn, who had real big dreams, and I think maybe would have become a designer if she'd gotten the chance. And she was so different. Like it's kind of insane. When I say aloof, I really mean it. And I think she was also someone who she'd said this before to family, like marriage was not the key goal for her, and that's not how she grew up, and her parents didn't have the best marriage. So they were as opposites come. So this is why I feel like they just were not well suited in so many ways. And I do think maybe it wouldn't have made him happy, but he would have, I agree with you, ultimately gone the path of his parents and found that quote unquote perfect prep school girl, right? God, it's weird to think about. Who would have that been? Oy.
Yeah, who would it have been? But you know what? There are women like that. You could find them. Just go to the board of the Met and you'll find a bunch of women who could have been married to JFK Jr. if he worked harder and shown more potential.
I know, be the perfect first lady. I can see it. God, you know what? In so many ways, like it's fun to imagine what their trajectories would have been after, just in terms of how the media would have handled it. I find that fascinating. The rumors would have never ended. Anyway, now I'm sorry to say we have come to the dreaded date, July 16th, 1999, the day the so-called love story ended. Now, if I haven't already established it, John had a lot of whims, not just in terms of his career or the women he saw, but he liked to have fun and he had the money and the name to do so. So, you know what? Why not become a pilot too, for the hell?
You can't pass the bar, but sure, fly a plane. This is what I don't understand. If you cannot pass the bar exam, why do you want to take your life into your own hands and do something incredibly dangerous like flying a tiny plane? I don't get it.
Oh my God, Sarah, I've lost breath from laughing. Thank you. I'm with you. So let's get into it. So he'd started taking flying lessons in 1982. So he did it for a few years at that point, right? Then he took a very long break. Then he continued like a year or two before this dreaded day, got his license in 1998. That alone, that trajectory of how he was practicing and learning is not the way to do it, as experts have said. Experts have also said that JFK worked with various instructors during that time, and that's also not ideal because then you end up learning different styles, different techniques. He should have been working with one or two people. So he was definitely already not learning in the ideal way. He was in the process of getting his instrument rating, which is training specifically for flying in clouds and low visibility. So keep that in mind. He'd only completed half that course. Typical JFK. Mind you, Carolyn and his sister Caroline did not love that he was taking flying lessons. In fact, they tried to discourage him. In fact, most of his family and friends tried to discourage him. Nobody liked that he was flying. Cut to July 16th. John decides to pilot a small plane on the way to Martha's Vineyard. On board is Carolyn and her sister Lauren. The two of them were very close. They were spending a lot of time together during this period. But the plane never makes it, which leads to panic and a full-scale search, with the story quickly dominating the news. Soon after, it's discovered that the plane has crashed into the Atlantic Ocean and all three passengers have died. Investigations later suggest that he became disoriented while flying at night through hazy conditions, and as we know, he didn't have the experience to be flying at night, much less in hazy conditions. He also didn't have the experience or certification to fly over water, which he did. So to be clear, there's no conspiracy, there's no foul play, just a very devastating accident. Here's a freaky fact, too, by the way. Carolyn's mom had asked John to never fly with both Carolyn and Lauren. That's brutal. Now, needless to say, the public reaction was enormous. Wall-to-wall media coverage, collective mourning all over the world. The sense that something symbolic was lost, basically, right? Because if we were calling this the love story of our times, what does it mean if it ends in tragedy like this? It reignited the idea of the quote unquote Kennedy curse, the narrative that tragedy follows this family, which sometimes I used to side eye, but I do think
No,
there's
it
truth
seems
to
like
it.
something's going on here. Yeah,
Something's up, guys.
I agree. I think that at this point we have so much data and it's so sad. I think that I was starting to believe it wasn't true, and then poor Tatiana tragically died, and now I believe there might be a curse. It's awful.
I know. You know who I really feel for these days is Caroline, because she lost both her parents quite tragically, her brother. She'd also lost Anthony Radziwill, who was JFK's cousin and also best friend, and who actually, they were worried he had cancer and they were worried about him losing his life around this time. It was very unexpected that it would end up being JFK. It was a short while after that Anthony also lost his life. So extremely tragic period for the whole family. I think what was tough is, so on the one hand, you've got the loss of this love story, right? But people had invested so much meaning into it, right? There was the beauty element, there was the promise element. What were they going to become? Sarah, do you remember this? And do you, like me, blame John for everything?
Okay, so as a fan of American history, it felt like the death of the American dream or the promise of it, because at the time I didn't know that JFK Jr., and I'm not trying to disrespect the dead, but I didn't know that he wasn't super bright. So as a child, I was assumed he'd be president. And instead of him being president one day, we got George W. Bush. So we got another Nepo baby, like you got the less attractive Republican Nepo baby. And so it felt like something changed in America, where it's like, now we are in the darkest timeline, right? Where it's like you're supposed to get the beautiful Nepo baby who salutes everyone when he's at his dad's funeral, when he's still like a literal baby. And instead you get George W. Bush, who can't really speak English, like less intelligent, even less intelligent
Definitely
than
couldn't
JFK
read.
Jr.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
even less intelligent. Let's just say that. And also Republican. And I'm not insulting anyone if I say not as conventionally handsome. I don't think I'd even consult George W. Bush. I think he'd be like, yeah, obviously not. So it just felt like America was just going in this opposite nightmare direction that has never really ended. It's just the nightmare is ongoing, right? I feel like that's when it started. And then 9/11 happened soon thereafter, as well as the George W. Bush years. And then you think with Barack Obama that it's turning around, but it's not.
Yeah,
It's
that
not.
cycle kept repeating. You're absolutely
Exactly.
right. Yeah. In fact, to the point where, as you were saying that, I was like, wow, because even that shift is very reminiscent of now the Trumpian era, right? Like that it was quite a turn. But yeah, God, you're so right. Yeah. I think what really sticks out in my mind is how reckless JFK was. And what's odd to me is that I don't think that that's really been a sticking point for most, first of all, publications. So the media did not run with that. And it makes sense because he was the prince, right? Like he was, again, American royalty. He was beloved. People don't want to turn on him. And it was easier to vilify Carolyn. She had been vilified in the press anyway, just for being the woman he chose. So no one was going to do that. And of course not, because he's also lost his life, right? So the bigger thing is we've lost this Kennedy who was going to be, some people felt like, this amazing politician who would save all of America. I don't know that that was true either, but I do wish more was said about his recklessness. And I think it speaks to who he was as a person, I'm sorry to say. Like we've talked about this throughout this episode now. He was very flighty. He had a lot of whims. He was not the most intellectual person. And I don't think he was grown, honestly. Like he seemed a little stunted to me. And he had his family and his friends constantly telling him, you should not be flying. He did it anyway. And I think people also forget that Lauren, Carolyn's sister, was on that plane
It's so
and she also
awful.
lost her life.
It's awful.
It's just so devastating. And she never gets, no one remembers her. And I
And
think
she was
that's
a really
awful.
impressive person, wasn't she? Was
She
a
was.
female finance executive in the 90s. And I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard enough for women in finance now, but in the 90s, listen, I'm not saying that I love everything that high finance does. I have some problems with some of the firms for sure, but she would have experienced a lot of challenges. So she was a truly impressive person to get where she got. And who knows what would have happened for her had she not died. I mean, she could have been a pioneering female CEO. And I think one thing that really upsets me is that we don't really talk about her when she was actually probably, of the three, the person who was doing the most, that was making an impact. That's just my take.
Yeah, so she was the VP of investment banking at Morgan Stanley.
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
damn.
Yeah.
Like, that was a smart family, and you're so right. She was probably the most impressive. Honestly, when I think about this, I do get chills. Like, it still unsettles me. And again, Sarah and I are not yet at the finale or at the end point in the show, but I'm dreading it. I hate reading about it. I hated writing this bit. I don't know what it is, but there is something about this that gives me the shivers to this day.
It's funny because this has always upset me. But now that I am a mother and I just keep putting myself in their mother's position, she basically prophesied this, right? When she was like, don't fly with both of them. It's just so devastating what happened. And her daughter was vilified when I don't know what happened. But obviously, if I'm her mother and I know that he's flying when he's not licensed to fly, in a way he's not licensed to fly, I'm obviously going to blame him. And then everyone's vilifying my daughter in the press. So I can't imagine. So much pain. So much pain. It's just, I feel my heart goes out to this family every time I think about this tragedy.
I know. I will say, so Carolyn's family, her mom specifically, just didn't talk about it much to the press, which is not a shock, right? Like, she was not a fan of the media. She didn't like what it was doing to her daughter even before her death. I think it's fair to say she wasn't JFK's biggest fan. The Bessette family did file a wrongful death lawsuit against the JFK Jr. estate. So they did reportedly win like a $15 million settlement.
As they should.
Damn right. Like, they should have something. But like, that's not enough, right? There's no actual justice there. And I feel like that also is not discussed enough, that lawsuit happened. Nobody talks about that. I think it's very strange.
And it's funny because when people sue for wrongful death, when they sue rich celebrities for wrongful death, people often try to paint that family that's suing as like money grubbing, like, oh, you're using this as an opportunity to cash in. No, what people really want, because Carolyn's family, they were not super rich, but they were not destitute. They were upper middle class. What you really want is some sort of objective truth that what happened to your children was wrong, right? And there's no one left who can go to jail, right? That, JFK Jr. died too. So this is the opportunity for the justice system to tell you you're right, to validate your feelings. I do think it probably helps with grief. And also, like, where was the money going, right? Like, they didn't have heirs. So it's not like they were taking money away from their grandchildren. I think that it's the kind of catharsis, it's the only avenue of catharsis that is available for you. And I have no idea what they did with the money. It's their choice. But I do think that I hope that brought them some sort of closure, to have a judge validate that what happened was wrong, that a very privileged, at best cocky, at worst just criminally arrogant man is responsible for their daughter's death.
Well said. Well said. I'll just add this one point. So the church that helped set up the memorial for the girls, for the women, the church secretary had this quote that I feel like really kind of captures that. And she said, quote, "People talk about Kennedy, 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 but they forget this woman lost 2 daughters that day." And we'll leave it at that. Now, in the years since their deaths, Carolyn is an enduring style icon to this day. Her aesthetic continues to influence fashion very clearly, and JFK Jr. has become a kind of eternal what if? Because there was and there is a collective belief that he would have eventually followed his father's footsteps, gotten his shit together, entered the political world. The questions are, what if he had lived? What if he did go into politics? Who would he have married if they did end up splitting, as Sarah and I were talking about? What kind of life would he and Carolyn have had if they did stick it through and if they were able to get through the pressure? I think it's interesting too. I mean, I think we've established he wasn't the smartest guy, but don't forget, when you go into politics, you have a whole team around you, and the Kennedys never operated alone.
No, sure.
They had such a beast behind them, and he would have had his father's team behind him. So say what you will about his knowledge and his expertise, but yeah, I think he probably would have gone quite far. Again, I don't think they would have lasted. Caroline already didn't get to continue her career in fashion because of the spotlight. I don't feel like being a first lady would have been in her future. Now, I do want to touch on Love Story. So a couple decades later, kind of incredible. We're revisiting it in all the same ways, but another reckless individual decided to spearhead this. Ryan Murphy. Ryan Murphy. Sarah and I love to trash this man on the reheat because he's terrible. But we are watching the show. We're watching the show.
So who's really laughing?
Yeah, I know. God damn it. Now, this series, as we've already introduced it, is titled Love Story. It's the first of what's probably going to be an anthology series capturing pretty hallmark. I don't know if it'll be American strictly, but the love stories that have pretty much dominated the headlines throughout time. This one obviously did. Here's the thing. The show is heavily dramatized, and while a lot of it is true, a lot of it isn't. It's worth it to do a fact check every week, guys, if you're ever watching a biopic, but I would specifically say a Ryan Murphy show that he claims is completely true. Now, last week, we discussed how John's ex, the actress Daryl Hannah, is brutally depicted as a drug-addled mess in his life and only a bad influence. I don't think a lot of that was true. They were together for some time and they were on again, off again. I think there was a reason for that. She spoke up recently and said none of that was true, and that she also did not dabble in drugs, did not have coke parties, which the show implies she did. And again, as we touched on in last week's episode, God, I mean, the poor actress who plays her, good Lord. I mean, it comes down to the accent alone, right? Even the way she walks, moves. Sarah said it best. Like, I don't know that there was ever a worse depiction of a real figure we've seen, at least not in the past decade, right?
No, not that I can remember.
No. Now, similarly, on CBS recently, 33-year-old Jack Schlossberg, Caroline's son, said, quote, if you want to know someone who's never met anyone in my family and knows nothing about us, talk to Ryan Murphy. I would just want people who do watch the show to watch it with one letter in mind, and that's a capital F for fiction. The guy knows nothing about what he's talking about, and he's making a ton of money on a grotesque display of someone else's life. Jack also said later, and I love this, quote, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, partly because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but also because Donald Trump has used JFK as a kind of human punching bag, both by renaming the Kennedy Center in his honor, by conducting a false investigation into the assassination and dismantling all the programs he fought for. There's now a lot of misinformation and iconography being used about the Kennedy family, my family, at a time when we really can't afford to confuse people. He's so right. And I think that's the best sum up of why this show just feels like such bad taste right now. The timing is really weird. I also will say, though, like, they were in the public eye. It's reasonable that at some point we would have gotten an adaptation. I'm surprised we haven't had a movie in all these years. It's almost seemed like people never wanted to touch this because it was maybe so beloved and protected moment in American history. I don't know. I've always been surprised no one touched it, or they don't want to offend the Kennedys. Knowing the Kennedy curse, would there ever be a right time to adapt it? I don't know. Ryan Murphy did respond in a predictably slimy way on Gavin Newsom's podcast, oddly, and said, quote, I thought it was an odd choice to be mad about your relative that you really don't remember. Like, who would say that? That's so foul. Jack responded to this and said he was the ring bearer at JFK and Carolyn's wedding, and he remembers that. He also remembers Wyclef performing. He remembers his uncle. And by the way, even if he didn't remember him, he's more than allowed to say what he said, and he's absolutely right. I thought, God, that Ryan Murphy comment is just in such poor, nasty taste.
But he loves feuds, right? We know that about Ryan Murphy. That's why he has a show called Feuds. So he's trying to create, I guess, season 28 of his show, which is going to be about his feud with the Kennedys. I don't know. That's just ridiculous. Like, just let the man have his comments. Why do you have to respond?
I do think, like, Ryan has drunk his own poison in some ways. And again, he's done this with quite a few other shows and depictions of other real people that people have struggled with in those families and who knew them. And I feel like, yeah, you're right. Like, it's almost like he feels like his own commentary is an extension of these stories. And it's like, you do not live in this fun little circus. Like, there's real people who are getting hurt. Now, that being said, I do think it's very valid to depict this family or elements of things that they've been through on TV, in film, in books. Like, that's just the way life works. I'm sorry. That being said, Sarah, I wonder, like, what do you think? Was there a right way to do it? Was there a right time to do it? Should they just really be untouchable? I mean, if we get to have the love story, do we not get to then also adapt it in other ways?
I've thought about this a lot, and I think it might have felt more tasteful if it had just been if it had been a series like The Crown, where this is just one season, and it's not just about their love story, right? So The Crown did delve into Charles and Diana, Charles and Camilla, and actually that's some of the weakest material, but it doesn't feel as it doesn't feel like it's in such poor taste, because Diana also dies in a really tragic way, because it's just part of a whole and there are other things going on. So that's not the only attraction. It doesn't feel as exploitative. It feels like, let's examine this dynasty, this institution, the House of Windsor. There was a show kind of like that about the Kennedys, which was not that great, nor was it that memorable, but it didn't go this far. It didn't go this long. So if you create a Netflix The Crown style series about the Kennedys and you give them that treatment, or even just about a bunch of American political dynasties, right? Where you could be like, American Dynasty, Ryan Murphy, this is your next show, where you have a season about the Bushes, a season about the Clintons, a season is about the Kennedys, a season about the Obamas, right? They kind of did a similar thing with that First Lady show that was really bad, but it was not good. The problem is, the hook here is this tragedy that we all know about. The tragedy is the only hook, because these people were fairly private about their love life. So we don't know a lot about their love story. So you're kind of watching it in this ghoulish fascination, like, when's the plane crash happening? Right. And I don't know. It just feels like it's in really poor taste. I don't know the classy way to say this. Also, unlike the British royal family, who are heads of state, like official heads of state for the United Kingdom. So everything that happens there is actually newsworthy. These people, this guy was America's figurehead prince, but not a real prince. So it actually feels a little bit gross that we care this much, because we're just caring from a gossip perspective. Whereas when you watch The Crown, you can kind of convince yourself, well, this is the historical record, so it matters.
That's a really excellent point, Sarah. You're so right. Because even though we feel like the Kennedys are forever in the political sphere, they aren't really right now. And it's true that with Trump dismantling so much of the work that some of them have done in terms of the ways we see them and how visible they are now, it's made that even more true. I hate to say it, but also this is how America works, right? It likes to have a kind of royalty.
They want royalty so badly.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why it's funny that they got rid of it, because they love it.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, God, I'd love to dig into the Rothschilds one day, the Stanleys, the Morgans. There's so many families that have kind of had this space, but I don't think any of them have superseded quite like the Kennedys have. And I feel like, because they of course will continue to procreate, this will never end. Now I have to tell you, Sarah, and I love to say this now because you've requested a Netflix series. Let me tell you, it's happening. So there is an 8-episode Netflix series. I believe it's in production right now. I don't know when it's set to come out. I'm assuming probably not until next year, the year after. But they're going to go from the very beginning. And I don't know if the plan is to make it an anthology and continue to follow them out of the crown. I hope so. Now, this series, so far, it's an 8-episode series. It's got Michael Fassbender set to play Joe Kennedy Sr.
Oh.
So we're starting way back at the beginning. And I think that's a really cool idea. And I hope this is a promising sign. Eric Roth is writing the series. And if you don't know who that is, he's been nominated for Oscars quite a few times. He's the man behind Forrest Gump, Munich, Benjamin Button, the more recent Star is Born, which I loved. So I feel like that's a very promising sign. That being said, I'm sure the Kennedy family is not happy about this. There's no confirmation yet if they're consulting the Kennedys. So that I think is an interesting element, right? Like if you do consult the family, I think that can clear up some things. But I suppose if the family is also just not open at all to conversation.
Yeah. And they're not telling you the truth, right? That's the thing. You don't know
That's another thing.
if they're telling you the truth. I don't know. But honestly, Joe Kennedy as Michael Fassbender, that's great. He's going to bring the BDE. And that character, problematic as he was in real life, has BDE for sure.
I no, I'm so intrigued. So let's see. And I'm really thrilled at the idea of starting from the beginning because they could keep this going. And if this is good, I'd love to see more and to dive in. But I do hope it's respectful. And by respectful, I mean I think the least we can do is be a little more accurate to what really happened. So for instance, justice for Daryl Hannah. Because I really feel like no one was
Poor
butchered
woman.
more than that
Poor
woman.
woman. Like, what did she do to deserve this?
Truly.
Nothing.
Truly. Okay, we're going to take another quick little break. We will be right back.
So you're running out of closet space. The good news? You don't need to stop shopping. You just need to start selling with The Real Real. The Real Real is the world's largest and most trusted resource for authenticated luxury resale. Whether it's that mini bag that can't even fit your phone, or those boots you never fully broke in, The Real Real handles everything from photography and copywriting to shipping and pricing. So you can just sit back, get paid, and make room for things that actually feel like you. And with 10,000 plus new arrivals every single day from top designers like Prada, Celine, Louis Vuitton, and Loewe, all for up to 90% off retail, you're bound to find something perfectly on brand to fill that extra closet space with. Plus, right now, you can get an extra $100 to shop when you sell for the first time. Make room for what feels like you. Go to therealreal.com to start selling and get your extra $100 to keep shopping at therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com. Terms apply.
And we're back. Okay, final segment, guys. Hindsight is 2026, where we choose the one moment that we might have handled differently if we were the subjects of the story, because we've got two here. Sarah, of course, listen, we wouldn't get on the plane, right? But other than that, what would we change?
I mean, don't have your sister get on the plane with you is more. I don't want to blame Carolyn. I don't want to blame her, but like, I mean, just divorce him? Like, I don't know. Why are you going to this family event you don't want to? But again, I don't want to blame these girls at all. Okay, what would I have done differently? Okay, here's what I would have done, because I'm a scheming mom. Okay, had I been their mother, and I understand why she didn't, but I would have gone to the press and given an interview to make myself look like so tacky that John couldn't have married one of my daughters. And then she could have just had her great career in fashion and been safe. So.
Oh, I actually really love that. That's quite devious. Oh, I really like that, Sarah. Because here's the thing. The mom was really kind of the one naysayer who was ever really discussed. And even today, I mean, in all this time, she stayed so quiet. And even today, we don't have much feedback on what she really felt. We know she wasn't happy, obviously. But I love that. I love that. And no one would have suspected her, too.
Then do a bunch of tacky stuff. Get kicked out of a restaurant. Just make it so that you are so toxic that your daughter can't marry a Kennedy.
Oh, that's so clever, Sarah. I love that. Okay, what would I have done? Gosh, there's so many things, right? I do wish that, more than anything, I wish that John had just gotten his act together, because I think he was playing like a child at this big age. And you brought this woman into your life, and I feel like he didn't have enough respect for what he asked her to give up inadvertently. So her career, her anonymity, her privacy, and then I think the fact that the way that they died, says everything about their relationship. I think that's the biggest takeaway. If there should be anything, he was reckless always. He approached life very childishly. He never really grew up, and that's what led to their end. And I just wish that he'd been a little more honest with her about like what he also saw for himself. I feel like he had a feeling even then that he would probably step into politics, and I don't know that he was honest with her about that. Maybe he was, we don't know, but I have a feeling he wasn't. And alternatively, I guess I just feel like on Carolyn's side, I wish she'd continued to, at the very least, try to pursue her career in some way, and that maybe would have given her some feeling of control. And like she still was living her life to a degree. Granted, that wouldn't be easy, because I don't know that fashion houses were so keen to hire her necessarily. I don't know. Who can say? Because on the one hand, the show suggests that her spotlight was too big, she couldn't do it. And this is often the reason, again. For instance, let's look at Michelle Obama, a very successful lawyer prior to becoming president, but there was no way like she could continue after. I think it'd be the same for Carolyn. That being said, I'm sure there were other ways that she could have been able to, I don't know, I'd like to hope anyway that she could have held on to that dream.
Become a fashion investor, right? Like he should have given her a certain amount of money to invest in up and coming fashion labels. And then you buy yourself the seat at the table, but she was qualified for that seat anyway. So I think that would have been the best solution. But clearly this man was not really thinking about what was best for his wife. So that didn't occur to him.
I don't think so. I'm sorry to say. Sarah, that's our Kennedy recap. God, what a hell of an episode. Again, please, when you're watching shows like this, specifically a Ryan Murphy show, do your fact checking. We will probably most definitely do another Kennedy episode because, again, there's quite a lot to dig into on the Kennedy side. But, one thing I will add, because we did talk about Jack earlier, he does kind of feel like who JFK Jr. would have been if he'd had more time, right? Jack seems to be following in his footsteps. Like he was very much all over social media for being a little reckless himself and a partier. And now he seems to be getting it together and gearing up for more of a space in politics, which I think is really interesting.
In Jack's defense, though, he's 33 and getting it together.
I know.
JFK Jr. was much older and still did not have it together. So I just have to say, like, everyone's allowed to have a misspent youth, right? Everyone, everybody.
Yes.
But Jack has grown up. And so in his defense, I just want to say, I don't know.
Thank you for saying that.
If JFK Jr. would ever have become a solid. Hopefully he would have. I don't know.
That's a really good point because, again, Jack also grew up in front of the cameras, though not to the degree that JFK Jr. did. But you're so right. God. Anyway, we could go on forever, but that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you to all of our wonderful listeners. You can listen to more of The Reheat for free on the Seeker app. You can also find the show on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at _StuffsOn. And on Instagram at Canada Whore. Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
So listeners can find me on Instagram at Sahakin Sarah. And if you liked this podcast, something that we really appreciate is if you can rate, review, and subscribe, because that does help other listeners find us. If you would like us to keep growing, another thing you can do, which we would love, is for you to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thereheat. We've got some goods in store for you there. If you are a friend of mine and you're listening, it is my 40th birthday on the weekend. So don't get me a gift. Just give us like $3 a month or $8 a month for Patreon. I'm easy. I'm a cheap date. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Bye.